Welcome, everybody. This is Denny with Karl Mollison, and we're on Get Wisdom, and we're continuing with our channeling series. And today, Karl is going to channel Al Bielek. And Al, within the UFO researcher community, ET research, that kind of thing, time travel, he's a pretty well-known figure. He has his testimony is pretty impressive. It's pretty amazing. There's been a lot of attempts to debunk some of the things that he's talked about, and he came forward, I think, starting in the early '90s, and he started to do public presentations. He worked with I think Preston Nichols, wrote a book. You will have seen a short bio with some links if you want to look into this further. I had to do a lot of research yesterday on this because I had encountered him, but it was years ago, and so I had to get myself back up to speed. And I was kind of shocked at the volume of material. So one thing we're going to do, which is a little different than what we've done in the past, is I'm going to read an excerpt from an interview that he did as a prequel to the first question after Karl goes into channeling. So with that, Karl, thank you so much for joining us, and I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about what we're doing in this series and about channeling specifically. So thanks, Karl.
Sure. So our host here, Denny Hunt, deserves the credit for most of the selection of these interview subjects. His quest for some time and before he met me was to learn the truth of things and to really explore some of the troubled areas of life, of society, of the interface of government and civilian experience, and some of the unusual things that have happened that really point to something more dark that has been going on for a long time. And it figures in the UFO experiencers, the idea of there being a secret government, a lot of things that are high level that are extremely amazing and profound that are routine in those sectors, and it's all top secret. And it's taking us forward in the future of humanity unfolding here in ways we're not, as average citizens, privy to, nor directly influencing in any way. So we like to think we're living in a democracy in the United States, and it really isn't. It's a constitutional republic. But beyond that, the powers that be do lots of things that are hidden from view. So the public never gets to weigh in on it. Is it a good idea? Is it being done ethically? Is it creating a karmic burden for all of the citizenry? If the government's acting at its own behest and doing things to manipulate, to subvert other countries, and do we really have the right to do that? In a ethical, spiritual kind of sense.
It's
And
interesting, Karl, that you bring this up because I think that precisely was the reason that I think Al Bielek decided to come forward and go public, because according to his account, the government actually separated him from his family when he was living as Edward Cameron. He had children, a wife, and they came to a park, and they took him away, and that was the last time he ever saw them. And I think that was I think he was angry about that, and he wanted to talk about that because I think he would have been tolerant of a lot of the other things that went on in his life, but I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back for him.
well, and that is very typical of the story. The people that have been involved in the government program that the disclosure movement is ostensibly blowing the whistle about and bringing forward participants to bear witness to things they did and saw is really the tip of an iceberg. It's really an orchestrated, very carefully controlled through mind control message. And it is wider, it is deeper, it is more menacing and more sinister in its implications for our future as a planet and as the human culture we've come to be a part of. And so we see that in all sorts of ways. So let me just quickly recount my personal observations here. In having worked with many people, part of this secret space program we have been told by Creator is really a mercenary army program, because that's its true purpose, not to create some young, enthusiastic, human space jockeys who can learn to fly alien craft and protect the world and shield it from any adversaries that might be looming and so on, using that advanced technology, the extraterrestrial savior scenario. It's really something quite sinister, and it's really the construction of a human armed force that's space-based in its armamentarium and the transportation capabilities. And the purpose of it is to aid in the subjugation of humanity and the potential annihilation of humanity. So the people brought into that program are manipulated in all kinds of ways. They're given the illusion they're volunteering, when in fact they're really not. They're mind controlled to get them to say yes. And then they're manipulated all along the way to suppress their memory over and over when they've been a part of something that was dark, or just to keep the secrets about the program itself and what they know about the technologies they observe and the extraterrestrials and so on. And so nothing about that is ethical. You see, any conventional involvement of people in the traditional workings of government and military is all done on a kind of honor system. And it's reinforced legally. They're taking oaths. They're swearing allegiance to the nation, to the proprietary information of those agencies, and promising, under penalty of law, yes, but promising to keep the secrets and to have integrity and to support the organization and not do anything untoward. But it's willful. It's a willful choice when people in a conventional setting go through that step. And of course, they're always checked out to be sure they're people of character and so on, and not of a foreign origin as a spy or something. But this is entirely different. The people are plucked out of their lives and mind manipulated all along the way and never truly have a free will choice in things until they may reach a breaking point, or they rebel from some deep part of themselves, or through a divine connection that they somehow can muster, and the divine helps them stand strong in the moment, and then they may refuse an order, something like that happening. Right. So this is something that, just on its face, given that description, assuming it's all true, points to the fact there's something deeply wrong here about the information behind the disclosure movement and the history of these kinds of programs we're going to be talking about with our interview subject. And then the second thing, and I've worked with a number of these individuals as clients, and I see their karmic history through more than one lifetime, often, where they've been manipulated and they've been a party to killing of humans. It's practice, it's training. This is what they do. They use existing wars and civil strife and all of this sort of thing. The war on terror is a perfect cover for all sorts of clandestine missions and raids where they can go in and wipe out a whole village and no one ever hears about it. No one ever knows. Don't even know who did it. And use these mercenary army program recruits in a training exercise to be sure they're tough enough, to be sure they're going to still keep the secrets and all of it.
Right.
So the other perspective about this is that when I work with people, just regular folk, 4 to 5% of them have alien implants. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
We're talking 12 to 15 million Americans alone who have been abducted during their current life. And this has gone on all through history. And so people are multiple lab rats through time for the alien exploration and manipulation. So these aliens who want to come out of the closet now and have us embrace them and allow them more into the power structure up front and visible have a lot to answer for, because they're the ones who have done this and are continuing to do it. And they have thousands of missions every day to pick up people out of their beds at night, often, although they can grab them anywhere, and float them through a wall up into a craft, and then manipulate them genetically, exploit them sexually for breeding, and so on. This is all sinister. It's all very creepy, and it's for dark purposes. So this is what the people in these kinds of programs that have been talked about are a party to in some way or another, in supporting that interface and its various offshoots and the research and development portions and so on. And it's meant to be a true collaboration. So this is supported through all our Defense Department work in the industrial sector involved with space technology, communications, and computer work, and even the biotechnology sector to some degree. Much of it is a make-work exercise, trying to string us along to get us ready to understand their technologies that we're really not ready for yet, and this sort of thing.
Right.
And what I'm told by Creator is that the government and the world governments as a whole are all being duped. And they're being given some carrots that are enticing, the advanced technologies.
Yeah.
And the military is all agog at what these beings can do. And they want that.
Right.
They want to be able to do the same things. It's a powerful incentive. And they use mind control as well to make them more complacent about the dark aspects. So our government's looking the other way, and they know about abductions, but they're complacent. They feel it's worth it. It's kind of a trade-off. And this has happened all through history, and you can see it. It's all talked about. There's a lot of declassified things where over the years they've done things to manipulate people in the public sector for military purposes as guinea pigs, because it was viewed as necessary to the war effort, for instance.
Right.
And it was just considered, one of those things. As a citizen, you may have to sacrifice yourself.
Right. You'll thank me later.
Yeah. So this is the mentality at the start. And they've done things like practice biowarfare, germ warfare, and spraying bugs into the air in cities to see who gets infected and this sort of thing. I mean, because it's viewed in the national interest. Right. It helps the defense effort and so on. And there's no other way to check it out than use a real city, So these things have happened just by our ordinary government. But no one and nothing is really ordinary these days, because it all has this backdrop of alien manipulation, the mind control. It's pervasive. Yes. It's through all our institutions. Yeah. So these people who have been able to come forward and escape that grip of control should be looked at very, very carefully, and their stories looked at carefully, because there's huge clues to the deeper meanings and what it represents. Right. And the power that is behind it. Yeah. These technological capabilities and what they've been up to. So
Right, and how much of it's disinformation? Because I mean, he's a classic example of the type of person that they could use for their own benefit, where he's supplied with a huge amount of truth from actual witness, actually witnessing stuff, and then peppered in there is a lot of stuff to keep other things covered up. Most notably, what is the extent of the alien involvement?
Yes.
He had quite a bit to say about that, but it was never really the upfront focus of his, warning, if you could say that, to his audience. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe later in life he went in that direction, but nonetheless, there's a lot of material here, and in an effort to actually, include some of it, what we're going to do is I'm going to read a preamble, if you will, that is going to be referenced in the first question after Karl goes into trance. So what I want to do is I want to read this now. This is this is from an interview that I found on the internet that he did, and I'll put the link on the description on this video so you could look it up yourself. And I'm going to read it. There's a long section and a shorter section that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to reference that in the first question. Now, typically, we're not going to get away with this kind of thing in the channeling, just because of the dynamic of, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we're usually much more successful with a very single issue, focused topic, single question. We ask the question, we get the answer. The answer is usually much more involved, but in terms of just keeping things in line and enabling Karl in the channeling process to get the question answered, we're much better off with keeping it short and concise and to the point, rather than going on with a rambling, prequel and like 6 questions, and then you sit back and expect all those questions to get answered. That's usually not very productive. So we try to avoid that. So this is a bit of a departure, and we don't know how it's going to work out. So if it works out, great. If it doesn't, my apologies to everyone, including Karl. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and read this, and then ask Karl to start start the session for us. So this is from Al. I believe this interview was done in the 90s. I'm not exactly sure. I'll have the link on there. You can check it. So the following is from one of Al Bielek's interviews. Well, we sensed what had been at Montauk. We sensed there had been a monster roaming the base, that a huge project had been operational there, that had been abandoned. The evidence was everywhere physically. Buildings were everywhere with doors standing open, wrecked equipment inside, and the gates were broken. It was an abandoned base. This is because Montauk crashed on the 12th of December in 1983. It's a long story how or why, but it was after the involvement with the Philadelphia experiment, which occurred on the 12th of August 1943 for the Eldridge, and August 12th, 1983 at Montauk. They were deliberately designed to lock up. It took a long time to understand this and gather the data about what was involved. This was part of an alien operation, because there were aliens at Montauk by design and by agreement with the government. They said, we'll help you build it. You've got the technology, but you have to understand what to do. We'll show you how to build it. So the government asked what was the price, and the aliens said they wanted their own agenda on the station periodically. So the government agreed to it. Even though it was run by private scientists, the government and the intelligence community in particular had oversight. There were no regular reports to the House or Senate, because not 1 cent of government money went into the operation. It was all private money. Parentheses, now, but in the first phase up to 1983, unparentheses. So there was no traceability. It was a privately run operation with government oversight through various military and intelligence organizations, and to some extent, they set the goals and the agenda in the sense that the aliens would come in. They told Dr. Herman Sinterman, the administrative director of the project until 1983, that he would have to learn to work with aliens. He was a hard-headed German who, in his life, probably had never seen an alien or even thought about what an alien might be. So he was told by the government that he would have to work with them. Well, of course, all of us who were there did work with them. We all knew them, we saw them, and worked with them every day. They had a draconian who was in charge of and was the chief director of all the alien interests. He had his own office. We called him Charlie. He was a 7-foot tall draconian weighing 450 pounds. He was extremely intelligent. The first time he was there, he looked down on humans as near subhuman species, which was almost dirt beneath his feet, because really they were intelligent far beyond human standards. Okay, then this is the second part of the preamble that I'm going to read from that same interview. Aliens have been on this planet for a long time, but in small numbers. After the Philadelphia experiment in 12th of August 1943, they started to arrive in large numbers. They could come in with big ships, park in orbit, come to Earth, and they literally started invading Earth en masse. They built a huge underwater base in the Bikini Atoll in the Pacific. Our intelligence found out about this. The Japanese were having problems with the aliens after we dropped the 2 bombs and before they surrendered. Parentheses. There were more than 2 bombs, by the way, unparentheses. In any case, our intelligence found out about the huge underwater base in the Bikini Atoll. How they found out, I do not know. But there were an estimated 500,000 UFOs in that base in the lagoon underwater. These would not be detectable by any techniques we had at the time. They decided to hold Operation Crossroads tests on the Bikini Atoll. They pulled the natives off the island, built the facilities, and of course made the 2 tests, of one on the surface and one underwater, with the bombs. So that's what I'm including here as something we're going to reference in the first question. So that's a more than a mouthful, but we'll see what we come up with. I just wanted to get some of those claims included so that he could address those as he sees fit as a light being.
Phew.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that for me?
So Karl, I know you probably want to say a little bit before you go into trance, so let's go ahead and do that.
Well, I'll keep it short, just to my usual boilerplate, that as a channeler, I have learned to connect to consciousness of all kinds. And I do it through Creator of all that is, to make the connection for me, to put safety around the work. And I've learned, too, that is really critical, because it's very hard to go out intuitively to connect to something without being noticed and someone stepping forward to do a handshake with you. And usually we'll try to be an imposter and a false representative of who you're trying to connect with. And that just leads to more trouble. And most channelers are in those kind of relationships. They're being minded. They've got hand-holding by the extraterrestrial alliance, in fact.
Okay.
And they think they're talking to archangels or ascended masters or whomever. And they're not really. And it's just a huge, huge, huge problem.
Okay.
So I'll just take a moment to go into the right state of consciousness to connect with Al Bielek in the light. And then he'll speak through me, and we'll go from there. And I didn't know anything about this person prior to just now. So we're all in the same boat, or at least I am, and with the viewers, many of them, and maybe there'll be some real experts steeped in all this lore.
Yeah.
Which is fine, because here's a chance to get some extra validation, perhaps, and encouragement about the value of these accounts that he left behind and others have added. So
okay,
that's the hope.
Okay,
we'll check it out.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
This is Al Bielek speaking.
Thank you for joining us. With reference to the preamble, which was the excerpt from one of your interviews, were these accounts and the ones you gave in your public presentations in the early 90s regarding the Philadelphia experiment and the related projects concerning time travel and association with aliens accurate?
Indeed, this is the case. Looking back now, being in the light, as a light being, I am back in true normal mode, meaning that I have a higher awareness and I am in my full spiritual manifestation as an extension of divine consciousness and am with Creator directly as I speak with you through your channel. As such, I must be truthful. That is not to say I can tell you all truth. There are many constraints still very analogous to how you might view special secret information with many, many implications affecting the lives of others, and consider the dissemination to be on a need-to-know basis. In our case, it is not the priority of keeping secrets. It is the priority of doing no harm. That is a fine line indeed, because the revelation of new insight, awareness, and deeper knowledge brings with it many consequences and responsibilities. The more dark doings we talk about, the greater the fear becomes in the listeners. And so this can lead to changes in the thoughts, feelings, and actions of human beings with karmic consequences, meaning through cause and effect, what I do and say can change the destiny of those hearing my words. And I must be very scrupulous here to walk that fine line to serve the needs you bring forth, which are legitimate in seeking the truth of things, and do it in the highest and best way. We do not wish to see a further purging of people associated with these programs who may still be living and able to tell secrets, who might be motivated to come forth on the strength of your discussion here and our revelations. So when you make connections with beings like myself, who have deep knowledge and awareness of prior collaborations between extraterrestrials and humans, there is often much held in reserve to address those concerns. We must do what is highest and best for all and strike a balance. The ability to be perfect is an elusive target. We will do the best we can and do all we are able to bring forward truth here. And that is a shared agenda we have with you. We are on the side of the humans here, not just being part of the human lineage, but knowing it is a grand and wonderful program and agenda of Creator to see humanity advance beyond the humble beginnings in which it is still mired because of outside manipulation. So in answer to your first question, we can tell you that the Philadelphia experiment is very much as described in the literature as being a genuine time travel experiment. Keep in mind that even though it was conducted in 1943 at a time of relative primitive technology compared to today even, it was based not on human technology, but on extraterrestrial technology that has been in existence for millions of years. So this is nothing new for them. It is routine for the extraterrestrials. What was new was for humans to be seemingly utilizing their technology for the first time on a large scale to make a real world demonstration that could be quite impressive and show the potential on a scale that would be relevant to human warfare. And so this was the genesis behind choosing a naval vessel as a target to be transported across time and then returned. And what was not appreciated was the consequences at both ends of the timeline. And there were other issues as well. And so the biggest of the secrets here, truly, other than the inner workings of the time travel technology itself, which we cannot share with you, is that the agenda of the parties involved in this undertaking were quite different. We, as workers, were part of this extraterrestrial human collaboration, but it was not being done in good faith. On the human side, we were eager, excited, and many, in a sense, greedy to gain the spoils, to have this new technology, and we're dreaming of all of the military applications, and at once to catapult the military might of the United States to an unassailable level of dominance that could never be matched without alien cooperation. And so as long as we were favored and respecting their wishes and their agenda alongside ours, we would be a tremendous beneficiary, because we saw this as being very one-sided in the sense they were so far ahead of us. We had much to gain, whereas what we could do for them was very, very modest. So we thought of their involvement with us as a kind of humanitarian gesture as much as anything. We knew there were scientific interests in our society and our makeup, and this they discussed with us. But there was much propaganda involved as well. Ideas like grooming us to be good cosmic citizens and to become full-fledged members of galaxy-level organizations working side by side for advancement of civilization as a whole, meaning all of the advanced worlds in the near neighborhood of the universe. This was all a subterfuge, because all of the near neighbors to Earth are under the vice-like grip of the extraterrestrial alliance, the group of collaborative, conspiratorial extraterrestrial civilizations who have dominion over the Earth and everyone on the Earth, and treat Earth as a slave colony, but operating from behind the scenes in a clever way, so that the inmates are unaware they are being guarded and they are being shuttled from one routine, mundane task to another, and at times commandeered to put on a show, made to do foolish things or reckless things, even mount wars of conquest and savagery, all through manipulation and for the amusement of the extraterrestrials, very analogous to the days of the gladiators putting on spectacles. And so, while humans had lofty thoughts of growth, enlightenment, and increased capability to transform society into a completely different world with free energy, with no need for war because of the guaranteed upper hand, the aliens, in the meantime, continued to view us as unworthy beings and lowly beings and as slaves. So this experiment was done as a kind of control measure to fend off the continued entreaties of the earthling scientists wanting keys to the kingdom and not wanting to see this happen from the perspective of the aliens. So what this experiment consisted of was a real-world demonstration of time travel done in such a way that it would backfire and lead to catastrophe. And this was to serve as an object lesson and a warning to humans that you are not yet ready to master this. And it still must be left in extraterrestrial hands to be done safely and effectively. And this was the agenda of the extraterrestrials all along in supporting the enterprise. It was wildly optimistic and, in a sense, reckless. That too was orchestrated. This was implanted as an idea through mind control manipulation to do this project on this massive scale. Specifically, that when it backfired, it would be a massive and horrendous consequence that would be seared into the minds of all privy to the information and would serve to dampen enthusiasm for many, many years to come, and would always be used as the object lesson and disincentive to parry any further inquiry and desire to master the time travel technologies on the part of Earth-based scientists and military and intelligence representatives. So this was an ill-fated venture from the outset because it was planned to be so. It was sabotaged in its very design and execution to create chaos on the part of many participants and the local circumstances of perturbation. And this is why the accounts of horrific scenes when the vessel returned from the initial transport into the future and back, the crew were abnormal. They were quite disturbed functionally in many respects. And the accounts of the bodies of crew being altered in horrendous fashion, turned inside out, or merging with the physical structure of the ship itself, with someone protruding out of the deck of the ship and being an integral part on an atomic level, were accurately described. No one would make up such a story wanting to be a credible witness. This was foreseen and planned and orchestrated to take place by the extraterrestrials. It is very analogous to a primitive tribe of humans wanting to make a high explosive and being given a kit to assemble whose instructions would create a time bomb that would automatically detonate shortly after the assembly were completed and thereby kill the participants directly. This is the nature of what we were involved in, and why human extraterrestrial collaboration will not ever be a fruitful exercise to benefit humanity. The extraterrestrials in your midst, in physical form, are dark beings. They are low-level beings, and their intentions are dark as well. They have advanced technology, but they are devoid of spiritual values and ethics. They are self-serving. They are rapacious. They are selfish and demeaning. If you think the return to slavery, as seen in pre-Civil War days, is a state of ugliness and degradation and depravity, poisoning minds and lowering the value of life, you can multiply that 1,000-fold to envision a life working, living, instructed by and supervised by extraterrestrials. You are seeing a mild version of that, with humanity being hindered from making great progress. You have some technology, but you do not have morality on a wide scale. You do not have fairness, equality, a genuine sharing, a sense of camaraderie and unity of appreciation in valuing one another. All is division, suspicion, hatred, isolation, a chauvinistic, selfish perspective of nation states, and on through every level of society in the disarray of institutions, the primitive nature of everything, from healthcare to law enforcement to governance to education. This is orchestrated to be the way it is by the very extraterrestrials now poised to come out of the closet, so to speak, to be embraced in wonderment by society and to engage in a formal arrangement to give them greater power and say over governance directly. Having seen their handiwork and participated in the collaboration for many, many years, and seeing it from my current perspective, I can tell you that this is not only a bad idea, it represents the potential undoing of the entire human enterprise, because they want to kill you. This is their ultimate goal, and we cannot sugarcoat this any longer. You have been told this by others. We can do no less. And we truly have earned our place to trumpet this message, having seen esteemed colleagues die at their hands, and the suffering in a large scale that resulted even from this experiment alone, affecting multiple generations of descendants of those taking part, and the lives that were not allowed to be born and continue with their normal destiny that were interrupted by the loss of the lives. So the Montauk site was a mirror twin for the transport of the vessel from the harbor in 1943. This is a base used again and again by extraterrestrial human collaborators and has been in use ever since it was first constructed in such a fashion. The collaboration goes back much further than you would think. It did not begin in Roswell. The purpose of the whole Roswell enterprise was at once to interface with a new group of humans and also to plant the seeds for an eventual disclosure by having a cover-up, but a sloppy cover-up, knowing there would be leaks, knowing there would be loose ends. And this serves the extraterrestrials because it plants seeds into the consciousness of human beings about the advent of extraterrestrial arrival in your sphere of activity and starts a kind of cultural preparation. At the same time, it is a manipulation and a distorted message as well. And this can then be used as a kind of yardstick or measure as to how effective the mind control manipulation might be to keep it secret from many, to make people complacent who see the evidence and believe it, taking it at face value, but nonetheless do not become alarmed and are not curious to look further what the implications might be of such an event. So things are never what they seem truly on the surface. And that is because each person's awakening puts them on a new path. But that path is new to them. And there have been many others who have been on a similar path far longer. And all of history has been a partnership with the extraterrestrials, but one not of choosing by the humans, but inflicted on them by the extraterrestrials. There were many alien bases in those times, both in 1943 and 1983 and beyond. There are many alien vessels poised in various bases around the solar system, as well as underground on the Earth, beneath the sea and deep below ground. This is routine and child's play in terms of the technology required. The alien presence is extensive and all-encompassing. It is done in the shadows and with a layer of complacency coupled with mind control misdirection, causing people to completely disbelieve in the possibility of an extraterrestrial encounter, let alone a secret cabal of extraterrestrials influencing anything of importance. This is the measure of their reach and is not proof or disproof of their existence. Humans are not reliable observers. The few who escape the mind control manipulation are easily sidelined. That is what happened to me in the course of my experiences, and then coming forth wanting to share what I knew, knowing it was something that would help humanity. And I did this not as a trader wanting to destroy things, but I did it as someone who still had a spiritual connection. And I did so with divine inspiration and support and encouragement. This is true of many whistleblowers. They engage in an act, in a sense, larger than themselves, because all humans are larger than themselves, but unaware of this. Your human form and your life itself are a crude portion of your potential. And anything that holds humanity back is your business. You all have a stake in this, and you can have a say as well. So the contest between humans and extraterrestrials alluded to in the other descriptions reflect the back and forth nature of energies. The need for secrecy creates disconnections of information and awareness. And there are many times when alien craft have been fired on by military officials not aware of what the other parties are doing. And that is one of the downsides in running a secret world. You must do this literally without the awareness of most individuals. And this does, in fact, create complications. It is just part of doing business. But the extraterrestrials have little to fear from whatever humans can do, because they have the means to step aside and avoid confrontation and to deflect most weapons. It is when they are physically present, they are vulnerable. And this they always avoid. For that reason in particular, they are loath to take chances to put themselves at risk physically. And this is a vulnerability. This is why the experiment in question was done by humans. Humans were the guinea pigs, and humans became the victims as well. The consequence of this massive failure were to quell the drumbeat to advance rapidly in acquiring the promised extraterrestrial capabilities. And that is why this installation fell into disuse. It was dismantled by the government side, the human side, in despair over what had transpired. And so this was done to cover up traces of the experiment itself and the attempt to utilize this technology.
Okay, thank you. Were you in need of a spirit rescue? And if so, can you describe your transition and rescue in consideration of your identity as Edward A. Cameron?
This was true for me, as well as many, many others. I was singled out for attention, and this is something that happens to many who are involved on the fine line between hero and traitor, depending on one's perspective. The Extraterrestrial Alliance does keep score. They track people. They are aware of their whereabouts, aware of their doings, and see them on a vast matrix of human endeavors with various notable events, in a sense, bookmarked or earmarked to gauge their impact on the extraterrestrial intentions, if any. Those who pose any kind of danger for true disclosure of things will be met with resistance and management all during their life, and then beyond the life to the extent possible. They understand that humans can be corrupted in various ways through manipulation of health, through emotion, and through distraction in fostering the attachment of dark spirits to them while living, and then cause them to stay earthbound after physical passage. At the end of their life, they should return to the light. This can be waylaid through manipulation if done in earnest. And many people who have suffered may have this fate spontaneously, not through a conscious choice, but more being unaware and unprepared for what is coming and knowing how they might help themselves to make a smooth transition. If the spiritual connection is not strong enough at that point in time, they will simply founder and their transition will be delayed. And they're vulnerable, so they will likely be set upon by dark spirits desperate for sources of energy. And these are a parasite that will attach and torment them in order to ramp up their energy need, which is supplied from the divine realm, and then will draw this much as they're tapping into them as a kind of fuel cell or battery. And the consequence for the human experiencing this is that they are tormented relentlessly and savagely. This is a fate that befalls all too many humans, but can be avoided entirely through some simple preparation and cultivating a belief in the higher realms. This is not an insurmountable obstacle. Many people are ready throughout life. It is those who have drifted away from spiritual orientation who are most at risk. But the despondent and the downtrodden and those suffering in some way through alteration of perception or physical debilitating conditions are at risk as well. They need support through prayer work to assist them. And this can be offered by loved ones when they are unable to be fully in control of themselves and thereby their own destiny. So I did have my struggles, and this is more typical than not. As you are hearing, it is a common tale, and that is an important lesson for everyone studying your work and your messages, because it is a preventable problem, but it can be quite a devastating delay in the soul progression to find oneself in limbo. And this serves the extraterrestrial alliance greatly because they use the dark spirits as a kind of weapons system, and they need it supported. And they also want to delay humanity in every conceivable activity, including making their way back to their origin, they do not fully understand the role of the deity in this, but they understand the human life cycle is a change in vibrational status that is characterized by an eventual return into the physical. This they wish to block because it in effect puts a person in prison. For however long they can remain as an earthbound spirit, they are out of action and not able to influence the workings of things happening in the physical. And so this is part of a sinister extraterrestrial agenda to further this happening and exploit its benefits for them.
Okay, thank you. Is the claim you made regarding the gray type aliens and how their nutritional requirements were met by soaking their bodies in cattle and or human blood accurate?